At this moment, an old man sitting across from Henry frowned slightly, then looked up at Ben. Sir, according to the rules of the family, the Rise in Scripture Pavilions only opens once every 10 years. The Rise Pavilion was originally a place for the genius disciples of the Joseph family to deepen their understanding of their true cultivation technique and develop their potential. Later, with the chief's kindness, he allowed the descendants of the family who showed promise in martial arts to enter the pavilion to search for their zeal. Even though they were only 10 years old and had yet to discover their inner cultivation technique. As for the Scripture Pavilion, only those who have cultivated their inner cultivation technique can enter and choose their martial skills. The old man said, This year we have selected 8 promising children, including Frank and Teresa, in addition to some of the students who have obtained the right to enter the Rise Pavilion through years of contributing to the family. There are now 28 of them, which is more than any other time. Since we know that, Henry will not be able to improve his inner cultivation technique. Letting him enter the Rise in Scripture Pavilions would just be a waste of the family's resources. Even in the current age of stars, getting to enter the Rise Pavilion and the Scripture Pavilion was as rare as a phoenix feathers and unicorn's horns. The Joseph's family Rise Pavilion and Scripture Pavilion used high-tech means and mysterious art formations to condense the essence of heaven and earth, making it much easier to improve cultivation techniques. It resonated with the energy center, brain, internal organs, and other parts of the body, helping people find the zeal, analyze their physique, and improve their martial arts skills. There were only a handful of people that could master such abilities, and many of these people were found in the Joseph family. But at the same time, opening the pavilions required a lot of energy. If it wasn't for the fact that humans had obtained energy origin stones in the extraterrestrial ruins and had found some primal stone mines in space exploration, these pavilions would not be the same, nor would they be accessible. Given this lack of accessibility, it also had to be noted that the Joseph family didn't have many of these stones. These stones were one of the most important strategic resources in the current era. The addition of one more person to the pavilion meant an extra portion of energy consumption, which was a large reason why many people opposed Henry entering the pavilions. Kaiden, my grandson, is only 10 years old. There is still much to be determined. You shouldn't jump to conclusions about him like this. Harry responded loudly with a glare. Only 10 years old? But in these 10 years you have looked for every possible solution. Are there any results? Everyone has tried to help him, yet you still won't give up. Give up? You wouldn't understand since he isn't your grandchild. But let me tell you, I, Harry, will never give up. As long as there is a shred of hope, I will fight for Henry. Fight for him? Do you know how many resources you have wasted in the family all these years? Just the pill alone required so many resources. Not to mention all the primary stones. Our clan is so huge, and we have so many clan members who need to cultivate. We can't just let your grandson use up what others need, can we? Oh, please. All of the resources we used came from my own pocket. I didn't take any of them for free. So Kaiden, what does any of this have to do with you? Seeing that the two men were getting more and more upset with each other, Ben frowned slightly and shouted, Shut up! Henry and Kaiden immediately stopped talking. However, they were still staring at each other. Neither of them was willing to accept the other. The two of them had been loggerheads with each other since they were young. Nothing had changed, even now that they were both over 100 years old. Ben had seen this behavior between them before, so he didn't dwell on it for long. He pondered for a moment and then said slowly, Rules are dead. People are alive. If it weren't for the ancestors of the Joseph family constantly breaking the rules, we wouldn't be as prosperous as we are now. Of course we are happy to let students like Frank and Teresa enter the pavilions, as they will be able to grow significantly. And we know that many members of this family have made significant contributions to the family so that gifted children such as them can be supported. It would be disrespectful to misuse such resources. We can still find more primary stones after we use the ones we have, but we can't give up hope for our family. Each new student that becomes stronger only makes our family stronger. Ben paused again, then continued. In 1 month, 29 of our family members will have entered the Rise Pavilion, and I propose that we include Henry in that. If he still can't sense his internal cultivation, let him enter the scripture pavilion as well. We will do our best and listen to the heavens' will. As the leader of the Joseph family, Ben not only had unparalleled talent in cultivation, but also in speaking and leadership. No one dared challenge his authority. Now that he had given these instructions, no one would disagree with them. After the matter of entering the Rise Pavilion was settled, they began to go over the gains and losses of the year and discuss the direction of the family's development. 1 month later, it was finally the opening day of the Rise Pavilion. Somewhere on the Heavenly Leap Peak, 2 middle-aged men led 29 teenagers to an ancient building that was decorated with mysterious patterns and stood in front of it. At this moment, the teenagers were filled with excitement and curiosity. All of the children were quite close in age, the oldest being 15 years old, while the youngest was only 7. However, if observed carefully, one could see that the group was clearly divided into 2 subgroups. One group was made of young prodigies from prominent families, including Frank and Teresa. The other group was older and more mediocre, and had yet to discover their cultivation technique. It created a clear separation between Henry, Frank, and Teresa. The older 2 had never disliked Henry and often played with him, but their family had always shown very clear favoritism to the older 2. It was not until very recently, as Frank and Teresa had progressed through the different karate belts, that they began to accept the training plan that their family had for them, and as a result had disappeared from Henry's sight. Now that the Rise Pavilion had opened, they had once again appeared. Obviously, they wanted to use the magic of their family's Rise Pavilion to improve their cultivation base and strength. The 8 children in the group of geniuses had far surpassed their peers. Even Julian and Lucas Hades, whom Henry had once envied, had not been selected. However, what was more surprising was that one of the older children who did not possess any cultivation technique but was clearly stronger than the other children stood among the group of geniuses. The others did not seem to have any objections. Other than these 8 geniuses, the other children were there mostly because their families had made contributions that allowed them to get their children there in hopes of them becoming martial cultivators. Henry wasn't a part of either group and had been traveling alone the entire way. One of the middle-aged men who had brought the group of geniuses said to the other group, "You were unfortunate but also fortunate. I say you were unfortunate because many of you are the same age or older than these children who have already developed their cultivation technique. You are already behind them. But I say you are lucky because you have the opportunity to enter the Rise Pavilion. You will still have the chance to become the pillars of the Joseph family in the future." These kids were excited. They were already imagining themselves figuring out their cultivation technique, eventually becoming ancient martial arts masters, able to hold great power. When the genius group of children saw the excited expressions on the other children's faces, the young geniuses had a look of disdain in their eyes. To them, the Rise Pavilion was of course helpful and a great opportunity. But if these children were going to rely on the Rise Pavilion, they would never become true experts. Everyone has 1 hour. At that time, regardless of whether you have sensed the zeal or how far you have cultivated, you will be teleported out. Therefore, once you enter, you have to adjust your condition immediately. I wish you all the best. After saying that, the middle-aged man pushed open the door of the Rise Pavilion. The child, who was obviously bigger than all the other children in the group of geniuses, did not enter the Rise Pavilion in a hurry. Instead, he walked towards Frank. Looking at his large muscles, which many adult martial cultivators likely did not possess, and his solid yet coordinated body, it was obvious that he was very strong. Frank fiercely stared at the larger teenager now standing in front of him. The tall boy pointed his finger at Frank and said, "Remember, my name is Alexander. I will be the leader of our generation of the Joseph family, not you." After saying that, he glanced at Teresa, who was standing next to Frank, and ignored the others. Alexander then turned around and was the first step into the Rise Pavilion. Alexander walked a different path for martial arts. He could have perfected his cultivation technique long ago, but he had chosen to adhere to the concept that it was best to improve the body first and then cultivation techniques. When he was very young, he began to work on his physical body and mentality, working to make his foundation solid before beginning his work in martial arts. This way, once he started working on his cultivation technique, the path of martial arts would be much easier and his abilities would be greater. This was the common path that many took. though many did not have this natural strength that Alexander did. They would usually get to a certain point and then not be able to develop any further, forcing them to move on to cultivation techniques. As for Teresa and Frank, they were an exception. One of them had a perfect physique, while the other had a special ability. They did not need to go through the stage of creating a foundation. Henry was another exception. His genetic makeup was extraordinary. His body was very strong, though it seemed to make him impervious to any sort of cultivation of martial arts. As he grew older, this trend became more and more obvious. Even the various methods that his elders had tried to help him with had no effect. Even the lord of the Joseph family who had guided Henry in his cultivation had not had any luck. As far as Henry's grandfather and parents knew, Henry was stronger than anyone else his age. Even an ordinary yellow-ranked expert might not be much stronger than Henry, even though he was only 10 years old. In this time, a person was considered a young teenager at the age of 20, and only at the age of 40 did they step into adulthood. Only at the age of 80 did the human body begin to gradually age. If his physical body was comparable to a yellow-ranked expert when he was 10 years old, then what would he accomplish as an older teenager or as an adult? If it wasn't for the fact that his energy center had died from the lack of use despite all the efforts to access it, the lord of the Joseph family would have likely treated him as a successor. This was only why the lord had resisted the objections about Henry multiple times. He had made many exceptions and had tried very hard to find solutions for Henry on his own. As Teresa watched Alexander, she smiled. Although she was only 10 years old, she had already had an indescribable grace about her. Her every movement seemed to be in sync with some kind of rhythm, making it pleasant to just walk her walk. Frank, on the other hand, stood there coldly as if he hadn't seen anything. His body would occasionally reveal a sharp edge, as if he was developing some kind of weapon, causing people who saw him to feel some pain. In fact, because of the Tengo Imperial body that he possessed, Frank had a strong aura ever since he was very young. Only Teresa and Henry could be near him because of his aura. Teresa, because she had a perfect constitution, and Henry because nothing could get through to him, the other children tried their best to maintain a certain distance from him. The conflict just now had caused some commotion among the surrounding children. However, the two middle-aged men on the side looked at the scene in front of them with a smile as if nothing had happened. The Joseph family encouraged competition among the same generation. This only encouraged them to be their best, and often led them to even doing better than the previous generation. It was this kind of competition that allowed the Joseph family to prosper for so long. As the men watched them, they wondered what things they would accomplish once they were out in the world. Just then, all 28 children, including Henry, followed Alexander into the Rise Pavilion. After that, the gate to the Rise Pavilion closed once again. In a mythical land, miles away from Rise Pavilion, the lord of the Joseph family, who was sitting quietly with his legs crossed, slowly opened his eyes, as if he knew everything that was happening dozens of miles away as well as if it were happening in front of him. It's open then. There are a few good seedlings in this generation that are worth nurturing. They will be of great use when competing with the other families in the future. He muttered a few names, but when he said Henry's name, he paused and could not help but sigh. Back with the children, Henry carefully observed this place that might bring him hope. So this is the Rise Pavilion, he said quietly. There were many sealed isolation rooms around him. The walls were densely covered with strange patterns, leading his eyes around the room to strange places. In the middle of the secret room, a foot-long incense stick burned slowly. Green smoke rose along with a faintly medical fragrance. It made everyone who entered forget about the distracting thoughts in their heads, making their spirits even more concentrated. It was awakening incense, which was made with several rare types of medicinal material, and it was specifically used to help people get rid of distracting thoughts and comprehend the martial arts. This kind of incense was extremely expensive, and it was even rare to have supply of it. Every gram could be auctioned off at a sky-high price, but all the children could see that there was a great deal of incense here, revealing to them just the beginning of the Joseph family's wealth. Alexander, who was standing at the front of everyone, took a deep breath. Then, with a brightness in his eyes, he pushed open the door of the secret chamber that was closest to him and walked in. The door automatically closed behind him. At the same time, a light flashed at the edge of the door and at the seam of the wall, and the crack disappeared. The secret chamber had become an independent sealed space. It was impossible for anyone else to enter. The others looked at each other and quickly found a secret room to use as their own. In just a moment, only Frank, Teresa, and Henry were left in the hall. Teresa slightly raised her tender, jade-like face and looked at her youngest brother. "Henry, you have to work hard. Keep up with us. If anyone dares to bully you here, tell me their name and I will protect you." She patted Henry's shoulder with a serious look, but then let out a giggle at his straight face. She then turned to find her own isolation room. Frank nodded and looked serious too. "I'll protect you too." Then he went into another room and disappeared. Henry did not know whether to laugh or cry, but he felt warm in his heart. His siblings were still there for him, but he couldn't bear to let them protect him in such a place. He had to become strong on his own. He clenched his fists and entered his own room. He looked at the simple stone platform in the secret room, and the footstool placed on it. After a moment of thought, he sat down. As soon as Henry sat down, the strange patterns on the wall outside the secret chamber lit up, highlighting the odd designs. Henry instantly entered the ethereal realm. "Where is this? Why am I here all of a sudden? What is this? It looks like blood. How strange." He paused again, looking around. "Where am I? Is this a heart? It doesn't seem to be beating very well." He paused and thought for a moment. He remembered his grandfather and father telling him that in the Rise Pavilion he would understand the secrets of his own body to the greatest extent. Am I seeing my own body? He realized that by learning more about his body, he would be able to understand the barriers of his inner cultivation much better. This was exactly what he needed. Henry was just like any other child. He noticed how fun this could be and started to mentally swim through his body, looking at everything. He noticed his blood was flowing very slowly and his heart was beating at an incredibly low rate. Henry saw his organs, his underdeveloped muscles, his white bones, and then his closed energy center.